you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. I know it's the middle of summer right now, but lately I have found myself wondering about cryotherapy. Oftentimes that's when I'm going to bed, and even though it's super warm outside, we are cooling down the room to be near freezing levels so that we can pile on the blankets. I'm not entirely sure why we prefer to sleep that way, but in this household, we really do love it extra frosty out and then with all the blankets piled on top to snuggle in, acting like it's winter all year round, interestingly, even though winter is probably my least favorite of all of the seasons. So today, we're going to talk about cryotherapy, what it is, the benefits and risks of it, what it can be used to treat, and stick around for the end when we also talk about cryogenic freezing and where we are right now in the scientific development of those programs. We may be closer than you think. So, first step, what is cryotherapy? Cryotherapy in general is just cold therapy, but it's extremely cold. It's not just the little chill of walking out into the winter air wearing your shorts. If you went to college in Appalachia like I did, then our winters get really cold, and by the time it gets up to 40 degrees, it feels downright tropical, and people will start wearing shorts to their classes. But this is even colder than that. So you are being exposed to these super cold temperatures for several minutes at a time. And you can get cryotherapy in just one part of your body, or for your whole body. They do have cryotherapy chambers that you can step your entire body into and get super chilly to help you out. When we're thinking about localized cryotherapy, you can think about like ice packs. They even have ice massages or different sprays that you can put on yourself that are very cooling. Or, if you've seen any movie about gymnastics or ballet or any other sports that are really heavy, then there was very likely an ice bath scene at some point. And that is also a form of cryotherapy. We just don't normally think of that in those terms. I think a lot of times we think about cryo in relation to cryogenic freezing and sci-fi. But cryotherapy is a lot of stuff that you're already used to. And taking it to the whole body level is essentially just putting an ice pack on your entire body all at once. Or dunking you into the ice pack instead of applying it to yourself. With whole body cryotherapy, you can put the entire body in extremely cold air for several minutes. Usually that means that you're going to stand in a chamber that is either entirely enclosed or that just encloses your body but has an opening for your head at the top. I recently watched an episode on Snapchat of one of Zac Efron's shows where he goes along with different people like Victoria's Secret angels and other celebrities and checks out their workout routine. And he does that with them. And then at a certain point, they do cryotherapy. It's generally administered at the end of the workout, to be specific. And when they do that, they are in a chamber that is enclosed with just their heads poking out the top of it. While ice packs can be as cold as 17 degrees Fahrenheit, and ice baths are ideally around 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to go down to a whopping 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit in the negative for these cryo chambers. So they are negative 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. We're talking orders of magnitude colder than these ice baths and ice packs. This great drop in temperature, though, also means that you can't stay in this very cold, low temperature air for very long. So instead of applying your ice pack with, the cloth between it, usually they say a towel, but oftentimes I find myself using like a t-shirt or something instead, but some kind of cloth barrier between you and the pack for 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off like that. We're only going to do 2 to 4 minutes for a cryotherapy experience. Now they say that you can get benefits from just having a single session of cryotherapy, but they also recommend using it regularly to get the biggest effect from it. So there are athletes out there who use cryotherapy twice per day, which seems like a lot to me, but then again, that's just very far outside of my realm of experience. They say that other athletes go daily for 10 days and then once per month afterwards. Honestly, at 2 to 4 minutes a pop, that doesn't really take a lot of time out of your day, other than having to drive to and from access to the cryotherapy chambers. I do know a couple of professional athletes who have used cryotherapy, and they've said it's really helped them out a lot, especially in the recovery aspects of their workouts. So to that end, we are going to discuss the benefits of cryotherapy. There are many different ways that this can help folks out. We can think of it both from a health and a wellness perspective, especially as it relates to fitness, but also as it relates to pain. So it can reduce migraine symptoms in lots of folks. And that might not be something that would normally pop to mind when we think about cryotherapy, especially if we are normally thinking about it in terms of fitness, which is how I first learned of it. But cryotherapy can help treat your migraines by cooling your nerves in your neck. So this cooling sensation, because it is at such low temperatures, can also have somewhat of a numbing effect. And some studies have found that putting a neck wrap that has frozen ice packs within it onto the area of your neck around your carotid arteries can significantly reduce migraine pain. So if your head is hurting, you would normally think, okay, I'm going to apply this to my head. But a lot of pain in the head comes from those nerves in the neck being compressed or inflamed. So by applying these to your neck instead, it can help reduce the amount of pain that you're experiencing from specifically migraine-related headaches. In fact, you can actually go online and find special ice packs that are designed to fit to your head and to remain there. If you don't have one of those, you may be able to use one of those eye masks that you put in the freezer. Just make sure that if it's not one of the fuzzy ones, that you do put a barrier on it for using it for localized cryotherapy. And by barrier, I mean, a tea towel or a t-shirt, something like that, that's going to help protect you against frostbite and other cellular damage caused by cold temperatures. It's recommended that if your migraine is located more on one side than the other, then you can direct the cooling to that side. You can go ahead and apply that ice pack to that specific side, that specific location, whether it's more in the front or in the back. If it's on both sides, use multiple ice packs and go ahead and target that area over your carotid arteries. And those arteries are close to the surface of your skin. They are pretty easily accessible. And they're what you feel when you are putting your fingers to your neck to check your pulse. So when you feel that rhythmic beat below your fingers on your neck, on either side of your windpipe, that is your carotid artery. So that's where they're recommending that you apply these ice packs in a localized manner to help reduce your migraines. And that, in and of itself, is a form of cryotherapy, and one that you can easily do in the privacy of your own home without having to pay anyone for it or go stand in a cryo chamber or anything like that. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how cryotherapy can benefit you in treating mood disorders, reducing pain in other parts of your body, and also numbing nerves that are irritated. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Before the break, we were introducing the topic of cryotherapy, what it is, and some of the basic uses of it, whether that be localized or over your entire body. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about different uses of cryotherapy. A lot of athletes use it to treat their injuries because it can not only numb the pain, but it can also help reduce inflammation. So this cold can numb an irritated nerve to the point that it's not constantly agitating you. Doctors can treat that by not just applying a localized ice pack or standing in a cryo chamber, but they can actually insert a probe, a very small one, into the tissue nearby the affected area. And that can help reduce pain from everything from pinched nerves or neuromas to chronic pain or acute injuries. So no matter how long this has been bothering you, if other methods have not worked for you, or if you are interested in cryotherapy, perhaps reach out to your doctor and talk to them about whether this might be helpful for you. Even if you're not an athlete, if you're experiencing nerve irritation, it could very well be something that could benefit you. I found it exceptionally interesting in my research on this subject that you can use temperature changes to treat mood disorders. So with whole body cryotherapy, because it is super cold and you're exposed to it for that 2 to 4 minutes, in that limited time, it can cause physiological hormonal responses in your body. So that means it can release adrenaline, endorphins and noradrenaline. And that can positively impact you if you have a mood disorder like anxiety or depression. Now, I hate the cold, and y'all know that, but I'm also on Prozac, so I am very curious as to whether that might be helpful. They do say that this is an effective short-term treatment for both anxiety and depression, but not necessarily a long-term one. A bonus impact of this is that cryotherapy can reduce the cortisol levels in your body. So not only can that decrease anxiety and depression that you're experiencing, but it can also help with having trouble sleeping, whether your insomnia is related to falling asleep or staying asleep. That treatment of just a few minutes of those super cold -200 to -300 degree temperatures can really boost your endorphin levels and give you almost immediate mood enhancement. It can make you feel like your pain has been relieved and just have overall feelings of well-being. If you do this long term, so once a day for a month or something, then you can get overall stress reduction. And if you use it routinely, it can stabilize your sleep patterns and reduce anxiety at nighttime, especially if you have poor sleep disorders, as we discussed in our episodes on sleep. That can negatively impact your immune system. So cryotherapy, by helping you with your anxiety and your depression and your sleep by impacting the hormones in your body, can also help boost your immune system by effectively removing what were stressors on it to begin with. So all around, it seems to be pretty solid when it comes to helping you out with serotonin and combating fatigue. Cryotherapy can also reduce pain that's associated with arthritis, which almost sounds counterintuitive to me. When my bones ache, I feel that heat is what makes me feel better and cold just hurts more. But there have been studies that have found that whole body cryotherapy can significantly reduce pain in folks who specifically have arthritis. It also allowed for them to participate in more aggressive physiotherapy and occupational therapy regimens because they are able to reduce that initial arthritic pain. So it actually is a really great companion, according to these studies, for rehabilitation programs. Scientists also currently think that cryotherapy could potentially help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's and different types of dementia are associated with inflammatory and oxidative stress responses. And cryotherapy has both antioxidative and anti-inflammatory effects. So that can help relieve those stress responses that are occurring in folks who have Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And this ability of cryotherapy to boost antioxidant levels in your blood can also help in treating atopic dermatitis. And that's because this particular skin issue has an inflammatory nature. So in combination with these antioxidative properties, it becomes a really good treatment for chronic inflammatory skin diseases. Now that is according to one study that had a participant number of 8. So those are the amount of patients who completed both the treatment and the follow-up info gathering sessions. So that's a pretty low sample size, and we've talked about sample size on here in the past. But they said overall in this very small study that the adverse effects were very few for their patients, and that, to their knowledge, the whole body cryotherapy device they used in this study could be used at an optimal oxygen level of 22%, and that would allow even patients with asthma to undergo this treatment. So if you had asthma and you were concerned about the cold of this, perhaps you can still bring it up with your doctor, because they found in this, again, limited study with 8 individuals, that this was something that would be safe for individuals who even have asthma to undergo in order to combat atopic dermatitis. They also said that this device that they used was the first to both use liquid nitrogen and compressor technology to produce the cold air, and that's how they're able to achieve that optimal oxygen level. It's pretty cool all the way around, and this article, if you want to check it out, is by Clemenco et al. 2008, Whole Body Cryotherapy and Atopic Dermatitis. So this article was also like 12 years ago, so there may be a larger body of evidence today too. But this one was really accessible online if you want to check it out. There was another study that I found interesting too, and this one is called Longitudinal 3D In Vivo Imaging of Sebaceous Glands by Coherent Anti-Stokes Raman Scattering Microscopy, Normal Function and Response to Cryotherapy. So that was absolutely a mouthful, but if you would like to check it out online yourself, you can look it up as Young et al. 2015. It's in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology. But the TLDR of this is that they were studying the cells of the sebaceous glands, your oil-producing glands that are associated with hair follicles and that produce a lot of oil, especially when you are a teenager, and how that can lead to people getting acne. So this is an acne study in mice where they pretty much gave these mice acne and then measured their secretions of the oil using a certain type of microscope method that allows you to just see oils. So they did this and found that cooling produced some changes in the structure and migration of these oil cells, and that means being exposed to cryotherapy at -8 degrees Celsius just one time was helping to gradually reduce the subcellular structures inside of these oil glands and these oil cells. And so that means it just broke down the little pieces that make up each cell. And it also reduced the lipid content in each gland. So it reduced how much overall oil was available in each gland in order to be excreted and then fed upon by the bacteria that cause acne. So by giving rats acne and then cryotherapy, we have found that cryotherapy may be a very effective way at reducing the amount of oil presence and production in the body, and may therefore be an effective method for trying to treat acne. So if you are interested in cryotherapy for any other reason, but also perhaps this one, you could talk to your doctor about that. Lastly, they do some types of targeted cryotherapy that can be used as a cancer treatment. So they refer to it as cryosurgery since it is going in and freezing cancer cells and then surrounding them with ice crystals. So it's invasive. So this one's cryosurgery, so it's a step above a lot of these that we've discussed earlier today. But they use that to treat some low-risk tumors for specific types of cancer. One of the types that they will treat with cryosurgery can be certain types of prostate cancer. So this is one of the localized cryotherapies. It's not the whole body one where you go in the chamber for that. So this is more like the methods they would use for numbing your nerve irritation or reducing migraine symptoms and things like that, instead of the whole body approach we discussed for treating mood disorders or reducing arthritic pain. There is a wide variety of disorders and other health issues that can be treated with cryotherapy according to a lot of the research I've found online. So if you are interested in any of those, whether they are whole body cryotherapy or a localized treatment, I encourage you to talk to your doctor to see if that might be an option for you. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the risks of cryotherapy. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Talking about some of the different types of health issues that can be approached with cryotherapy. Now we're going to talk about some of the risks. So even if you have one of the disorders that we mentioned earlier that's normally eligible for treatment with cryotherapy, it's not necessarily safe for people who have different health conditions or for pregnant women. So if you are pregnant or you have severe hypertension or various heart problems, then they warn you against using that. So your doctor might tell you that you're not eligible for cryotherapy based on having a conflicting issue or being pregnant at the time. Also, if you are under 18 years old, parents do have to sign off on this. So heads up about that. For folks who are really sensitive to the cold or have nerve problems like neuropathy, their conditions can actually worsen if they try cryotherapy. So they recommend not to do that if you have one of those associated conditions. They also found that the treatment was safe when used correctly, but there is a big caveat to that. So when they say that it is used correctly in this instance, it means in short amounts of time, remember about that 2 to 4 minutes, and that you're doing it under supervision, so you're not by yourself, and you are not wearing any clothing that's wet that could freeze and cause frostbite. So your hair is dry, your skin is dry, you are wearing any clothing that you need to protect different bits by making sure that it is totally dry, not even sweat dampened or anything like that, because it could cause frostbite. Remember, this is -200 to -300 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how cold this is. So even a couple of minutes with wet clothing in this could cause frostbite. So it can also cause skin irritations that are similar. So think about, have you ever had windburn? I'm from the mountains, and so it gets very, very cold here in the winter time, and I've had windburn a couple of times. And it is a bummer. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it can make your skin feel really dry, really sensitive, and then also it'll turn it pink, almost like sand or something has been rubbed across it in a way. It's not fun to have. But you can get that type of skin irritation from cryotherapy too. So it's not just that your cheeks look a little bit pink or something, like it is kind of painful. So you don't really want windburn. So make sure that you are dry. If you've been working out, then you need to make sure you totally towel off and are dry before you go get in there. And there are reasons for these rules. So you shouldn't lift without a spotter, right? Right. So this is very similar in nature to that. And in 2015, a cryotherapy spa employee stepped into the chamber unsupervised without anyone else over there around them, and they never stepped out. So there are very real reasons for these rules. And recently, a woman filed a lawsuit against her gym and cryotherapy company after she said she received permanent scars from the procedure. I don't know the outcome of that, or if she has a legitimate claim. That's just what she reported had happened. But the procedure's not FDA regulated, so you're going to need to look at a lot of the background information about the places you want to visit on Google. So go through there, make sure you check with like the Better Business Bureau and things like that to make sure that you're going to get a place that has a good reputation and good reviews so that you know that it will be safe, because there's not really anyone regulating these. Now, we mentioned cryosurgery specifically earlier, and there are risks associated with cryosurgery too, that are specific to cryosurgery because this method has risks, but when compared to other cancer treatments like surgery and radiation, the risks for cryosurgery are considered to be lower. But these risks do include blisters, damage to healthy tissue or vessels that are near the site of the cryosurgery, infection. You can get a loss of sensation if your nerves are affected. You can also have pain, scarring, ulcers, some white skin at the site of the surgery, and sexual dysfunction. So now that we've covered all of the different risks that are within the cryotherapy community, where people are going, yes, we are still big fans of this, but this is what it does. These are some side effects that it's had for some people. I want to talk about what the FDA says it does. So we've talked about FDA regulation a little bit in the past when we were talking about vitamins and other types of supplements, but also earlier in this podcast, we mentioned that the FDA does not regulate this. So I want to discuss what that means and why. So if you go to the FDA's website, they have an article that says whole body cryotherapy, a cool trend that lacks evidence, poses risks. So there's the government scientist being punny again. I do love weird science article naming. But my point is that they are saying that these treatments haven't been proven to do any of these things that they claim they're able to, like being a better alternative to those ice packs and ice baths that make them more effective in treating rheumatoid arthritis, or saying that it's not true necessarily that a few sessions of cryotherapy can help you with depression or weight loss, like we discussed earlier. So that's the problem here, is they don't feel that there's substantive evidence to say that this does definitely effectively treat these conditions. And part of that is because of the small sample size for some of these studies. And they are right to call them on that and say, hey, hold up, this is a limitation, this is what science has told us so far. They wouldn't be doing their due diligence if they did not put a pause on it when these studies only have 8 people following through with the post-treatment meetings. So the FDA says they don't have evidence that whole body cryotherapy in particular really effectively treats these diseases or conditions that they talked about, like different forms of dementia or mood disorders or musculoskeletal issues. So they say that they've not approved or cleared these whole body cryotherapy devices as being safe and effective for specifically medical conditions. They don't care about the spas, but they are saying that these medical conditions, hold up. That's not necessarily been shown to be efficacious and or safe. because a sample size of 8 doesn't really give you all the data that you need. You need more data points, both to see how things go right and to see how things go wrong. And that can better inform how we're using cryotherapy. Like that article I was talking about with y'all earlier, in which they found a great oxygen level that's ideal for most people and is even inclusive of folks who have asthma. So while the FDA is not necessarily endorsing whole body cryotherapy, they aren't saying that it doesn't necessarily work. They're just saying we don't have enough data yet to be able to tell if this works. So if you are interested in cryotherapy or cryonics, or you were ever a big fan of Mr. Freeze in the Batman universe, then this is an area that could really use more research. If that is what you're into, then maybe you have a new thesis topic, you guys. And I do mean you guys plural, because there is such a dearth of research on this subject with very small sample sizes that they need a lot more studies on this. So go out there and support each other's research and get us some answers about whether cryotherapy really does work and how safe it is. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about cryonics. That is the freezing of human bodies for future resurrection. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about risks associated with cryotherapy and the specific form of it referred to as cryosurgery, as well as what the general scientific and medical community think about cryotherapy regarding how safe and effective it is. Now we're going to talk about cryonics, so cryogenic freezes. There is a difference between cryogenics and cryonics specifically. So cryogenics is the branch of physics that studies the production and effects of very low temperatures. So how to make these super low temperatures and what these temperatures do with the environment around them, how they interact with everything. While cryonics specifically is the practice of using those very low temperatures that are produced by cryogenics to try to preserve a human body. So movies like Demolition Man and TV shows like Altered Carbon are examples of cryogenics, that study of physics, being used to make really low temperatures that are able to sustain a human life, or to temporarily pause that life and then restart it at any desired time, just by manipulating those temperatures. So far, we've only been able to freeze deceased individuals, though, who have volunteered for these procedures, because it's kind of unethical in the scientific community to kill another person in order to test this out. And if freezing someone alive goes awry, then that is effectively what is happening. So they're not really allowed to take that risk. So far they have tried storing human corpses or severed heads. And remember, all these people are wanting to do this. In fact, they are paying people a lot of money in order to do this and hoping that they might be resurrected in the future. So being spun back up like an altered carbon. But they're saving both the body and the essence of the human, I think, is the overall intent. So at least the brain is what is saved. And that is also very similar to how it looks in the sci-fi cartoon Futurama. So I hope that that helps put it in kind of a perspective of how this works. And it's really widely regarded by scientists as being something that probably does not work. People are very skeptical about it, and they think of it as being pseudoscience. So that is why it was also a plot line of one of the X-Files movies. I think it was I Want to Believe. So the one where they have all of these frozen dogs and everything, and they're trying to resurrect them, and there's a Russian scientist, I think, if I recall that correctly, who is trying to also resurrect his body. Or at least his head. So it's very Frankenstein's monster in concept, especially when you think about folks having only saved their severed heads to be cryogenically frozen in a cryonics procedure. So it makes sense as to why the scientific community is widely regarding this as being pseudoscience. Now that doesn't necessarily stop people from engaging in this, whether by paying people money to save parts of their body for future cryonic resurrection, or it's doctors, people who are scientists at the very least, who are working on this type of research and offering these services. So even though mainstream scientific community does not believe in this at all, it's still something that people are doing. So I'm still very curious about how that works, and so I looked into it. They can only freeze you once you are legally dead, but then the cryonics procedure can start within minutes of your death. So you've already signed the paperwork for this, and as soon as your clinical death is established, if you're in a hospital or something, then you can go ahead and start the cryonic procedure. So they will use cryoprotectants to help prevent ice from forming during your cryopreservation. So instead of cremation, this would be cryopreservation is what you're doing with your body following your death. And this cryoprotectant is there to keep your biological tissue from getting freezer damage. So if that ice was forming, that would cause some problems. Think freezer burn with your tissues, and that could really mess them up and prevent resurrection if we get to the point where that's possible in the future with, having good tissue all the way intact. You don't want to be resurrected and be covered in frostbite and stuff like that, right? But this is actually a pretty normal substance found in creatures around the globe that are in really cold winter areas. So they essentially have antifreeze in their bodies that helps to keep their tissue from getting freezing damage during really cold winters. I think it's really neat. So some of them are proteins and others are other types of compounds, but certain types of insects, fish, and amphibians have them in both the Arctic and the Antarctic regions. So there is a biological basis for this, but the overall principle is that it's just protecting your body materials from getting damage from the freezing process. And the cryoprotectants themselves help those cellular tissues to be cooled very, very low without forming that ice, and not having ice at those temperatures is called vitrification. They say that they could now go ahead and vitrify, like super cool without ice crystals, organs as large as the human brain, and they are able to have excellent structural preservation. That doesn't mean functional preservation, though. So it's very important that we do pay attention to that phrasing, so they are able to preserve the anatomy of this, but not necessarily the physiology. And it says organs as large as the human brain, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've successfully vitrified a human brain, just an organ that is as large as the human brain. That's not to say that that wouldn't be cool in its own right if you were able to vitrify another creature's organs that are the size of our brains, or if you were able to keep the structure of a human brain or someone's liver that is as large as a human brain intact post-vitrification/freezing. That is still pretty remarkable. But it's also important that we say exactly what we mean and mean what we say so that there are no misunderstandings here. And this feels a little intentionally misleading, in my opinion. A lot of this also seems to rely on the future of nanotechnology, specifically in the realm, of course, of medicine. So they want to be able to repair your tissue and grow things back using nanites, little tiny robots. So this is all very futuristic. And don't get me wrong, we are steadily marching into the future. But at the same time, we don't know how far into the future that this really is. And they're kind of relying on recovering preserved people with this nanotechnology sometime in the future, and to use that to help maintain or repair any of those brain structures that help encode memory or personality. So the parts that we consider the self, or some folks may consider to be the soul, the essence of who that person was. So the TLDR of this is that this issue, cryonics, whether or not you can resurrect a human with their consciousness and personality and everything intact, just like they were Snow White asleep for however long, or Sleeping Beauty also asleep for however long, until someone just came and woke them. So they're just temporarily paused, essentially, instead of really dying. They're still themselves. All of this relies on three basic things. That survival of structure means survival of function. So is that person intact? It relies on the concept of a soul in some ways. If you think of the soul as being synonymous with the self and of the person, your consciousness, who you were before. It also relies on whether or not you think that, well, not even what if you think, but whether we're factually able to get cold to preserve the essential structure of these organs with a high degree of accuracy and efficacy, so how successful this is, and then also whether or not foreseeable technology, like those nanobots, could repair injuries that are in the preservation process. So it seems to be acknowledging that there are some issues of tissue injuries that are still inherent in the preservation process. So what they're really saying is if A to B to C is true, then D, cryonics, should work. And they're saying, well, these things are true, so it should work. We've not been able to successfully do it today, but we think that science is saying that it should work. But that's also really why it's still science fiction, because it should work, but it has not yet become scientific fact. But a lot of different places that offer cryonics or cryopreservation are relying on that future technology. And I'm sure many of them are legitimate in their belief and dedication to it. So if you are interested in cryopreservation, you can go and check that out online as well. As always, with anything we talk about on here, I definitely encourage you to do a lot of research from well-respected sources and make that decision for yourself. Now, keep in mind that so far we have been able to cryogenically freeze and utilize embryos at later dates, and they have now been born and lived full lives. So we've been able to do that with embryos, but we have not been able to successfully resurrect anyone else in that manner. So if you want to go and use cryogenics, so that's just the physics of lowering the temperature really low to help preserve these things for later, like embryos, that works. That's cryogenics. But as far as putting your whole body or your head into this preservation unit that uses cryogenics, that is called cryonics. And you can put your whole body in there for about $200,000, or your head only. That's called the neuro option in a lot of places, and that is $80,000. One of the cheapest ones that I have seen is $28,000 for a whole body cryopreservation. I'm not really sure if they're like tiers of quality when it comes to cryopreservation though, so I have no idea if you really do get what you pay for when it comes to it, or what. I don't know if it's just a difference in storage facilities or higher tech, or maybe they just have a lot of money or a lot of discretion. So I can't really tell you if it's a good deal. I plan to donate my organs and long bones and corneas and then go ahead and be donated to a forensic anthropology human decomposition facility. So I haven't looked that far into it, you guys, but if you're interested in cryopreservation, you go check it out online. See how you feel about it for yourself. It is your body, and you have the right to do whatever you want to it after death, really. I don't think that, in the end, cryotherapy is all that much stranger than cremation or many other of the options you have when making end-of-life decisions. Maybe in the future this will be the norm and we'll all look back and laugh at how folks ever thought that cryonics would never work, just like people used to think that the sun revolved around the earth. For now, though, choosing cryopreservation means going ahead and being cryogenically frozen with the hope that science will advance enough in the future to bring you back. So it's kind of a wish and a prayer kind of thing, but if you have the money for it, that might be an option you decide to take. In the meantime, to recap, cryotherapy is still not FDA regulated, and we need some more research on that to prove that it totally does work. But we don't have any proof that it doesn't work, as far as I can tell either. So, again, there is hope, and it comes down to personal preference and the decisions you make with your doctor. If you've tried cryotherapy, cryosurgery, I would be very interested to hear from you on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram regarding your experience. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.